Audio stories for between stops. This story is for everyone, especially listeners who like jogging. It's called Pacemaker. A deep breath, a small hop, and Colin launched forward. The daily torture had begun. He checked his pedometer, started his stopwatch, and adjusted the blood pressure dial on his right arm. A glance on his left wrist checked his pulse indicator, lung pressure meter, and his body temperature. His latest air cushion trainers gave him the extra bounce of impetus, and a note of his weight in his PDA completed the routine checks. Except, this morning, he hoped his run would be anything but routine. The glow of dawn rising above the trees reduced the street lights to ineffective glimmers as he turned, his feet crunching a steady rhythm on the crisp grass towards the golf course. Pursing his lips and with anticipation wriggling into a stomach-gripping tingle, he neared the final bend of the lane. Timing was everything. If he had got it right, today he would catch the hood. Moving easily around the curve towards the golf course entrance, his heart doubled into a thump. A figure was running ahead. The hood, his mystery jogger, was turning onto the golf course. Immediately, Colin lengthened his stride, quickly closing down the figure ahead. At last, he would catch Mr. Mystery. A jogger of 10 years and a diet and exercise fanatic who checked his health as carefully as a miser checks his bank balance, he considered himself to be exceptionally fast and fit. Yet, and the distance was a dismaying proof that after some 400 yards of hard pounding, the hooded, flopping tracksuit ahead was as far ahead as ever. Passing the third tee, his first time check brought a disbelieving blink. He was 10 seconds quicker, and his pace meter indicated his fastest stride ever. The mystery jogger was moving very, very quickly. Excellent. Colin grinned. This was just the sort of pacemaker he needed. Digging in his toes, he lengthened his stride and demanded more effort. There was a lot of ground to make up. Ignoring the fingers of pain gripping his muscles, he gritted his teeth, quickened his pace, and stretched out even further. Today, the hood had met its match. He had jogged this golf course for the last 5 years, shaving down his times, reducing his weight, and building his stamina as his fitness and endurance increased. Although rewarding, it had become almost an obsession, despite and at times a difficult, jaw-clenching, gut-wrenching training discipline. But the footprints had changed everything. Suddenly, his solitary trek had added interest, the elevating kick of competition. It had started in midwinter. The stark white of the first January snow and the icy black trunks of the trees presented a fresh, new backdrop as he began his run alongside the first hole. Muffled warm in a thick jumper and running tights, with his lungs smarting from the icing air and a small cloud of breath freezing before his face, he listened to the satisfying crunch of the untrodden snow compressed under his trainers. Except it was not untrodden. He had company, the footprints ahead telling him he was number 2 to an earlier riser. The following morning, again the footprints waited, disappearing into the snowy mist, their course matching his, except for 2 deviations up small hills, as if the jogger ahead, dissatisfied with the challenge of the straight and level, welcomed the added exertion of the steeper slopes. The snows of February melted into the heavy damp of March, changing the footprints to grass green on the silver dew, beckoning him to follow, taunting him the latecomer as he stepped onto the course. Determined now, Colin reset his alarm and arrived just before dawn. But disbelief was his first emotion of the day. In the dying moonlight, the smudges on the grass traced their usual path, a mocking trail for a loser to follow. He started his run on the dark fairway, and at first light, arrived at the 6th tee, the highest point of the course, where most of the fairways fanned out into the thin mist. Peering into the lightening gloom, he scanned each fairway in turn. Then, far to his left, halfway down the 18th, there was movement. The hooded tracksuit was racing down the last fairway. With admiration, he watched the figure swing smoothly around the green before disappearing behind the small spinney at the entrance. Considering the distance the jogger had just completed, the hood was still moving fast, very fast. Resolute now, he made his promise. He would meet the man and run with him and beat him. Hysterical, stupid, and brainless were a few of the adjectives moaned at him by his wife as their alarm went off earlier and earlier. But it was 3 mornings before, after scanning the fairways for the footprints, he smiled. The broad expanse of grass, a sea of glittering steel in the moonlight, was untouched by human foot. For the first time, he was ahead. His start was deliberately slow, just half his usual speed, to allow the other runner to catch him. But apart from a fox on its way home and a panic flutter in the bushes of frightened birds, his constant turns and glances behind revealed only wide, empty, open fairways. And for the next fortnight, the dew on the grass remained undisturbed. Once more, he was the lonely runner. His hood had vanished. It was mid-spring. Some 3 weeks later, the new leaves, forcing their way into the world on the tree branches, had not yet hidden his view over much of the course. Colin was just reaching the pain point of his run, the moment when his legs were lead, his lungs were popping, and his brain was yelling, "Slow!" Looking up from his self-imposed torture, he staggered and gasped. Only 200 yards ahead strode the hood. Fatigue, aches, and pains vanished. Surprise bounded Colin forward. He could catch the hood. But, just tantalizingly close, again Colin was foiled. At that moment, the jogger ahead gave 2 small jumps, changed up a gear, and steamed forward. Colin accelerated, but, like the donkey chasing the carrot, the gap between them remained stationary for a quarter of a mile. Then, to Colin's dismay, he saw the inches begin to add. The runner in front was pulling away. He tapped his pedometer wildly. It must be faulty. He could not be running that fast. With a huge effort, he pressed even harder, and slowly, excruciatingly slowly, the gap between them stabilized. For another quarter of a mile, he struggled until gradually the hood pulled further away. Heavy legs, heaving lungs, and with his energy tank empty, dazed, exhausted Colin staggered down the fairway. Tottering to a gasping halt at the last tee, his legs surrendered, and slowly he crumpled to the grass. The hood accelerated around the last green, and then, with effortless strides, notched into a sprint through the entrance and into the lane. Still hysterically gasping, Colin squinted at his dials through the stinging rivulets of perspiration pouring down his face. His pulse was going bananas, his blood pressure was near fountain level, and he had forgotten to stop his watch. But his pace had blistered to his best ever. For the first time since he could remember, he walked home, slowly, allowing his body to catch up. His morning run had become an obsession, and now he had another, the hood. He had to get in front. Tomorrow he would win. Tomorrow he would lay in wait. His ambush had been successful. Now, just passing the 5th tee, he was catching up. By making another enormous effort, slowly he inched nearer the flapping hood. But the effort was killing him. His pulse rate had increased, his blood pressure was soaring, and his pace had risen by a third. His lungs were on the point of exploding, and as he drew level with the runner, he gaped with amazement. The other jogger was on the phone. 2 more paces, and he inched ahead. Then, stride for stride, he painfully matched the pace, astonished that his legs continued working and were still attached to his body. Hearing him alongside, The other runner flipped down the hood. "Good morning." It was a good morning Colin would have expected to hear on the train or in the office, a calm, normal good morning, a good morning full of pleasure and control, unlike his gasped and strangled reply. And it was also a good morning of the wrong sex. The hood had concealed not the short haircut of a male athlete, but a flow of golden tresses. His man was a woman. With a beaming smile, she closed her phone, lengthened her stride effortlessly, and accelerated, leaving her competition in a heap on the fairway. Between waves of nausea, the rattle of air hammering in his lungs, and what he was sure was the icy spread of rigor mortis, Colin stared wide-eyed at his instruments. They had gone crazy. The readings were way beyond his capabilities. He forced his eyes into focus on his watch and then refocused them in disbelief. Either the hands were in the wrong place or he was an incredible 3 minutes faster. Colin blinked through the pane at the disappearing figure ahead. It was terrific, and it was great. In fact, it was more than great. It was an honour. That he had stayed 2 inches ahead, even though for only a couple of seconds, was a huge achievement. He lay back, spread-eagled on the grass, and giggled. There had been very few runners who had matched his hooded lady. His giggle turned into a triumphant snigger. After all, Sissy Morrison was the world and Olympic 15,000 metre champion.